There you go. So today is January 27th. I'm Sandra Arevalo, Director of Community Health and Wellness Department here from Nyack Hospital. And today, as always, we have two great people joining us, and they are psychologists right here from Montefiore, Nyack, Susan Mazzarella and Stark Walter, who are also good friends of mine. They are so great to talk to all the time, of course, because they're psychologists, that's what they do. And today we're going to be talking about myth or truth and the effects of screen time in social interactions. So, you know, this is a topic that everyone has something to do with, and it is affecting adults as well as children, as well as adolescents. And, you know, as I was preparing for this community chat, I was reading, and it's so much about that. And some articles say, yes, it has a negative effect. And then some articles are like, no, it doesn't have a negative effect. So, you know, I guess it's really a matter of beliefs. I don't know. So I guess Sue and Star, that's why you're here today, to help us understand a little bit more about this topic and how we can address it better, I guess, with our families. And just a reminder to our participants, please ask questions. You probably already heard me. This is my favorite part of the community chats, when you guys, you know, write something in the chat and you write your comments and your questions. So use the chat, use the Q&A, just make your voice heard. And I don't even know, where would you like to start? Sue, Star, do you want to first introduce yourselves? Let us know a little bit about your background.
Yes, yeah. Well, thank you for having us, because we've done these before and we always enjoy doing them. I was saying before we even started that I watch them whenever I can. So whenever there's one of Sandra's webinars or chats, actually, that come up, I just click on it. And I said, even if I can't be at it, I usually look at it later if I can. The topics are just great, and everyone you have is just wonderful. So kudos to you. I am the director with the Montefiore Nyack Hospital Employee Assistance Program. I have to be able to auto-correct this a little bit, because I'm not a psychologist. I am a licensed clinical social worker. However, you know, certainly we have a tremendous amount of psychology background, and we do treat people and families where, screen issues or overuse and screen time is an issue within the family. Sometimes it's not necessarily just the child or the adolescent, it's the parent. So I guess, I know Star is going to talk about some statistics in a minute, but I think a lot of it is really just parameters, and it's kind of setting up routines and certain, again, parameters and kind of boundaries, right? And some of those are common sense, right? Around usage and around the impact that the usage has upon the individual, right? Maybe it is the child or the adolescent, or maybe it's even the parent, or maybe it's within the whole system. Because you can sometimes have a whole system. Do you have those, times when you're out and you're maybe in a social setting and you see there's like 7 people seated together and there's 7 people on their phones of like all different ages, right? No one's communicating. So we're going to talk about some of those things. But Star, you have some very good statistics and very valuable for people to look.
Yeah, so thank you, Sandra, for having us, as you said. And I too am a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been with the Employee Assistance Program for 25 years here at Montefiore Nyack. And I think it's a great topic, and it's certainly getting a lot of discussion. And in doing a little bit of research for this chat, Sue and I were talking about, we wanted to really be able to look at this issue before COVID and after COVID and see where those statistics sort of fall, because this was an issue before COVID hit. There were a lot of people concerned about how much time our children, for example, were spending on screens. And screens, of course, can include not only smartphones, like Sue mentioned, and what we're doing here, which is now webinars, have certainly been a change in how people relate after COVID. Sometimes I go through so many webinars, I can't do another webinar in a day as a, as an employee or as a worker. So, but it includes TV watching and movies and video gaming and tablets. And there's so much that screen time includes, right? So how much is too much? And we said, let's look at, that's those statistics. So they're going back, the ones I'm going to sort of cite right now are from 2018. Okay, so pre-COVID, this was getting a lot of interest. And so the adult screen time statistics are coming from the Nielsen Market Research Group. And for the kids and minors, it comes from Common Sense Media. So if anybody's looking for more information on this, those would be two really great resources to make note of. So Common Sense Media does a lot of research when it comes to children and teens. So pre-COVID, on average, their poll found that adults were using 11 hours of screen time a day. That includes, again, how much people are watching TV, how much movie watching are they doing? And it was up 9.5 hours from 2014. So if we look at the timeline, 2014 to 2018, we have an increase in 9.5 hours of screen time.
But that was when that included work time, or no? I thought it was.
This does not include work time.
Does not include
recreational.
Recreational.
Okay? It's a hard statistic. And the reason why that statistic has a huge number is because if I am on my phone and also watching TV, that number gets doubled.
Yes.
If I'm on my phone and watching TV and working on a paper or computer, it gets tripled. And how many kids do that? Right? They're on their phone and they're also watching. So there's like a double impact. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I
wait a
have the
minute.
same reaction.
Like sometimes, I need some background noise, right? So I use my phone to play some background music while I'm at work. Would that time count?
Yes.
Screen time, even though I'm not really looking at the screen, I'm just listening to music?
They did use music also. So if you're multitasking, and you are influenced by sensory. So but when we talk about screen time, we tend to only think about the visual, but that's a great point, right? If you're using music, how did they quantify that?
Right.
I just want to add one other piece. Even more than that, part of this research that she's speaking to, if we are counting it 3 times, is that really an accurate measure? That was also brought up into the research, because many, many people do what you're doing, Sandra. They have maybe just some music in the background, but it was in this research counted, and it would have been counted as 2 hours, or what what the measure was. So that's why there's a lot of disparity in some of the research.
This is also not work related. So it's not how much screen time you spend on at work if you're working remotely before COVID, but it also is self-reported. So the research is self-reported, which also is probably, that's something else to consider, because we tend to underreport what we're doing also. And for teens, they found it was 9 hours a day. Again, not including homework or schoolwork time. But for the adults, it was interesting. The average was 4.5 hours of TV watching out of that 11 hours. So teens were 9 hours, kids 8 to 12, 6 hours a day, and kids 2 to 5, they did it by the week, 32 hours a week, which would be about 4.5 hours a day, which is a lot of screen, a lot of exposure, even if the TV's on in the background all day in the house. How is that, looked at? So, how much is too much? It's very hard to measure. But we looked at the statistics of how it changed after COVID, and it changed a lot. So the number of hours, really, the way, and Sue will talk about this, but how we use the screens changed. One of the reasons that people increased their time was because of boredom. 4 things they found: boredom, disconnection. People wanted to stay involved in the news. If we go back to pre-COVID, there was a lot happening politically in the country, and this is US, by the way, I should also quantify that. and what was happening politically in the country. People wanted to know. They were doing a lot of research on things. There was a lot of, racial issues going on. There was a lot happening in addition to COVID, and then many changes where we had to adapt really quickly to a different way of connecting to each other. So there's a lot packed in to what that looked like, but that after COVID statistics found that the way people were using social media was to try to connect. Its intended use, social media, was to keep people connected, and because of the physical distancing, and also that people were sort of aware that too much screen time. So this came out in this post study, which they used a measure. I don't want to bore everybody, but they used a measure called the EAT. So it's the I want to make sure I say it correctly. So it's the eating and activity over time measure. So they were looking at physical activity also and changes. We just pulled out the screen time pieces, but people weren't moving as much, right? So they did a EAT before, and they called it the SEAT, which is the COVID one, to see how much people were reacting, on a mental health level to not being connected, not seeing people in person, all of those things. So feeling isolated, as a way of trying to connecting. But I guess my point was, people were aware that they would get to too much screen time and then they would pull back. This came out in the study, that people were aware sort of that this wasn't good for them, even though they had an increase.
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers were pretty high. I think we talked before the meeting or the presentation was like 37% increase in the use of social media, and like the streaming and online, what TV. I think it was
Basically
like streaming Netflix.
Binge watching.
The binge watching went like really, really through the roof.
Yeah, had a 55% increase.
Well, let me tell you an anecdote. I don't know if you remember, there was like a day where WhatsApp and a couple of apps stopped
Went down.
working.
Yeah, they went
Exactly.
down.
I almost went crazy that day. I was like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
felt like I was completely disconnected from the world.
Yeah.
And at that point, with COVID and everything, it was like the only way you could communicate with people. And I really felt bad that day. I was like, oh my God, this is how the world is going to end. That's what I thought.
Right.
And I agree. It's after COVID, we're doing a lot of things in the computer. We're using all of these apps a lot more. We used to have a lot more in-person activities that now have become virtual. And I think that is going to stay that way as well. But, are there any advantages to that?
I mean, as Star mentioned, as far as variables, I mean, there are a lot of different things you want to look at, right? So you want to certainly look at people's age, their personality, male versus female, their health, their physical health, generally. Again, are they in a healthy state? Because we do know that if you're really using, or at least some research can show us that, more extreme kind of overuse of any kind of real electronic product. Like Star said, the format as far as, is it a tablet? Is it an Xbox? Is it a smartphone? Are we listening through a headset? All those do influence things, but we know really extensive overuse can lead to physical health issues, right? It can lead to sleep difficulties. It can lead to being overweight or even obesity. It can sometimes propel people, certainly those that may have existing mental health issues, towards depression, if you will, or anxiety if their phone isn't ringing, or if they're unable to view their phones, or again, whatever the device might be, use their game box, whatever it might be, and even just neck and back problems, as simple as that. So certainly the content of what people are looking at is really important. You want to consider there's so many different variables. Are they looking at a video game alone, or are they with other people online engaging in a video game? Because then there is at least that element of interaction, of connection with others, of an engagement Yeah, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, Susan, I wonder about that actually, because, you know, like, for example, I've seen a lot of kids and even teenagers, and I don't know how they do it, but there is this way how they can play games with other people. And I'm always wondering, like, how do you know who the other people are? You know, for example, my nephew does it, and I'm always asking him, he's like, oh no, these are my friends from a school. I know he knows them, but at the same time, I know that sometimes they get like pop-ups from people they don't even know, you know? So I wonder how many kids are interacting with people that they don't know who they are, what their background is. You know, I don't know, that
That's a
scares me a
safety.
little.
Yeah, that's a safety issue. And I mean, it really is separate from the, you know, is it being overused? I think parents and, you know, again, part of this is the age of your child. But from very, very early on, we really do need to be aware and to monitor to a fair degree, depending on the developmental stages and ages of our children, you know, what and who they're interacting with. Right. So, you know, if they're, you know, spending a lot of time online, you know, who is it with, being able to know who it might be with. I don't like to use the word policing, but it really is an awareness. I mean, I think there needs to be communication. As you said, that's the best way to start it, just as you did with your nephew. Just saying simply, hey, I'm wondering who are you really talking to? And he says, you know, Auntie, don't worry about it. I'm talking with, you know, I know every one of these people. And advising and educating and being involved if our children, certainly again at more younger ages, it's kind of hard to monitor some of this when you're looking at 17-year-olds and later adolescents, but who they're online with and who are safe online, my word would be kind of safe online people who they're going to engage with. And that's because it is a virtual world. They need to be aware with who they think it is on the other end of that virtual line. Certainly if they may see them, but sometimes if they're not able to view them, you know, they don't really know who that is. So they need to be, and they may think they're their friends because they play video games with them or because they look like they're 15 or 16 years old, and they could be something very, very different.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a different, you know, that's important. You know, so and you know, I think, you know, again, what are they doing online to get back to? Are they watching videos, playing games, or these again violent video games, or are they you know, what are they really doing online, you know, as far as the actual characteristics? Are they engaging in, you know, pornography? Is it sexting? Are they consuming things rather than creating things? So are they just watching, you know, like a sliming episode on, you know, some whatever it is, TikTok channel or whatever it might be, or are they actually playing a game of chess with somebody? Or are they learning, you know, about video games? Or are they creating a video game? So those things are really important. And then I think also is to when they're doing it and how they're doing it. Are they doing it in the middle of class, meaning excessive use? Or are they doing in between classes using their smartphones? Are they traveling down the highway trying to text somebody, you know, versus, you know, being parked somewhere and they're going to be engaged. So I think there's a lot of characteristics we have to look at.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that, and that resonates with me a little bit as well, because you say, okay, how are you using your phone, or when are you using your phone? But, you know, I remember, you know, 20 or more years ago, I used to take the bus, and at the bus stop, you had to just wait for the bus. It was the same people at the same time. So you started getting friends with them, because what else did you do, right? Just to talk and like, oh, you're waiting for the bus. Yeah, the bus is late. It's go today, whatever, you know. But nowadays, you just see a big line, everybody on their phone. Nobody talks to each other. I feel like people don't even know who is in the bus with you. It's not the way it used to be when I took the bus 20 plus years ago, that we kind of knew everybody and it was a bus community, you know. So you see how things have changed, definitely. And I also wonder, you know, I was reading something about the effect of this screen time, especially between adolescents and parents. So I don't know if you have something to say about that. Like, how does it affect it, especially with adolescents?
I think what we as parents do as models have to be taken into account, right? And this is, again, pre-COVID. I wish I had looked at this statistic, but more people own a cell phone than a toothbrush worldwide. That's a really scary hygiene question, right? But as parents, it's our job to model and have conversations like Sue brought up, bringing this conversation and you brought up. You know, for myself, with my children, I watched this TV show Catfish, and we had a conversation. I watched it with them. We talked about it after, and it showed how people could misrepresent themselves online. And we would have a conversation about it. So have a conversation about the pros and cons to using technology. You know, there's a term now called technoference, and it's the interruptions that happen in families based on technology. And we kind of have this low grade, half listening, half not listening dynamic. And I think I just want to speak to, you know, parents too, that we are sometimes in the middle of doing something and our child comes in, and how important it is to put that down and give them our eye contact and our full attention, and how that models that what they have to say is so important, more important than the other thing. But these conversations to have with them, how much time do they think is too much time, right? Get them to talk to you. And I think another piece we talked about is that, again, in working the work we do here at the EAP, is there's a lot of times parents get defeated. You know, I want to spend more time with my, especially adolescent, and they would rather be on their phone, or they would rather do this, that thing. So we want to encourage parents to keep, if they're going to nag, that's a good thing to nag about. Okay, don't nag about their clothes and all that other stuff. Nag about spending time together as a family. Nag about, let's go for a bike ride together. Come on, everybody, we're doing this. That's the part you want to not let go of. And you'd rather have the kid reject you than you stop asking because you rejected 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. Keep asking, keep letting them, sending that message. You matter to me. I want to spend time with you.
Yeah, I would just want to add the other point of it is, rather than nagging about, you're always on your phone, that phone's always in your hand, put down that phone. You want to nag about, hey, can we have a conversation? Hey, can we go for a bike ride? Nag about those things rather than making the object of the nagging.
Correct. That's not what I was referring to.
That's right. But
it wasn't clear.
The way you said it was just, let's nag about, you know, hey, let's get together. Let's go for, we're going to plan a family night. No, I have this to do, or I have too much work. Continue to nag about those things, but don't make it about the control issue. But setting limits within the family around screen time, having kind of, if you will, policies in the house around, you know, usage. You know, it was like the TV's off if we're having dinner, no phones are on the table. Some of the research and some of the guidelines are suggesting that even have no screen time, no screen use in bedrooms, right? I can imagine if I said to my teenager, you know, first of all, I would say your laptop needs to be off and done, right, by a certain time. But if I said you can't have your phone in your room or your laptop, I mean, you know, but they're suggesting that, you know, maybe there really should be bedroom-free zones, certain areas of the house. Maybe it's the den, maybe it's the kitchen that are, you know, screen-free zones, modeling your own use. And then it's okay to be able to have policies. It's just so easy to be really very subtly, you know, kind of quietly leech away with your time off your phone. There's phones and any kind of screens are very, very compelling. I mean, this is from TVs. TV now is more compelling than ever. You know, screens are more compelling than ever. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what their business is, right? I mean, that's what tech companies and you know, IT companies, you know, that's what they want us to do. That's how they make money. So we need to really be aware of it, I think, if it's slowly eating away at other activities or a diversity of activities that would provide the same or greater values. And you brought up talking with people rather than just being on the phone. So it's if there is this, change it up, right? Where we're not maybe always on a device, I don't want to keep saying phone, on any kind of screen device or time, and to be able to add other pieces of or other activities or other engagement, and to mix it up, if you will. So maybe there are times when the people are at the bus stops and they are talking with each other. Certainly if it was, everyone's phone went dead at the same time, I can guarantee you they'd be talking. But being able to interface with other activities, even if we need to, like my word would be, or Stour's word too, is kind of nag about it and keep going, full throttle with let's do other things, put our phones away, let's have a family night, whether it's a board game, let's take a ride, let's get out in the snow, whatever it is, to be able to have other types of engagement and not feel that you're missing your screen or that you're missing something greater. The fear, the FOMO fear that we're somehow, if we spend 3 hours away from our devices, we've really missed something hugely significant, is not realistic. That's a concern.
True. Lynette is saying, I'm looking at the chat here, it's like, really babies 0 to 2 or 3 should have 0 screen time, except maybe FaceTime with friends and family. And then UB is asking, doesn't too much screen time affect the sleep as well? With all the stimulation, which can lead to lack of focus in school and at work.
Story, you were talking about the 20 and 20 and 20, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it absolutely can affect our sleep, especially if you have it, right next to you. I think there was a study in the Journal of Pediatrics, and I saw Lynette's link to the American Pediatrics, who they do have a wonderful, and they partner with Common Sense Media as well around really helping families develop parenting plans around screen time. And 0 to 3 should not have access to these devices. This is, and we are not really understanding the tremendous effects of that, but again, common sense that that's going to affect, how we take in information. And the guidelines are really 1 to 2 to 3 hours during the weekdays and 3 to 4 on the weekends.
Separate from school time, right?
Separate from school, because that's not part. This is recreational screen time. We can't talk about that, the educational changes that have happened. But those are guidelines. So, what becomes excessive use, right? And does it affect our sleep? It affects how much we move our bodies, affect our sleep. So if we're sitting sedentary looking at a screen, that's going to affect overall wellness, including our ability to sort of turn the brain off and relax and get back into a healthy simulated, dusk and dawn sleep regimen. That's how the body, the light coming off of a screen affects your sleep.
Yeah, it's like the blue light they've talked, you know what I mean? The actual physical light that comes off the screen can stimulate if you will, and interrupt. We do some trainings, if you will, on kind of sleep hygiene. And that's one of the things we say is it really shouldn't be off. You shouldn't see it at all, again, because some of the lighting. But I think also too, the factors of what we know within kind of our brain chemistry, right, is if my phone beeps, it literally signals things in my brain that I need to look at that. I feel compelled that I'm going to need to look at that, or I'm wanting to look at that. We do know really the research that shows what parts of the brain light up when someone hears their phone ping, or when someone gets a like on their, on their chat or their Instagram, or a smile face emoji. And it really does stimulate parts of the brain. We know this, and can, if you will, kind of produce even certain neurotransmitters that are the good, feelings, if you will, dopamine and other types of things that happen in the brain And then if we don't get those things, and Star talked about this too, us together before we did this, is that if you don't get those likes and you see that Sharon got, 400 likes, but I didn't get any on my last post, or she got, 2,000 thumbs up and I got 2 thumbs down, the reverse can happen, right? What goes on even in our brain and in our emotions and in our thinking can take on a negative, and that was really never meant. That was really not how the intention of some of those likes, thumbs up, and emojis were ever intended for.
Yeah.
So even the people that created and wrote this technology, the engineers of the infrastructure of what we were founded on now, that's not what their intention was, but unfortunately it took on this, hidden.
Yeah, it's become like a popularity contest, and I see it with my daughter who's an adolescent. Like she posts something and she's like constantly looking at her phone, trying to count how many likes she's getting. Like it's the end of the world if she didn't get X amount of likes or something like that. And I know that I read somewhere also that this is helping to increase the rates of depression and anxiety among not just adolescents, but just in general.
Yeah, I think that's when you move into, and that's where the balances are, right? So how many hours am I looking at that? Am I saying, well, I need at least 2,000 likes? And of course, this is just, to be able to kind of feel good. And if it's under 500, I'm really not going to feel good. And certainly an adolescent isn't looking into it that far, right? But when it gets to an excessive, it's starting to impact my interactions with others, or negatively impact my own kind of emotional balance or psychological balance. And this is hard for young people to self-reflect on that sometimes. As an adult, we can, usually more easily do that, say, this isn't good, I need to kind of put this down and kind of, modify behaviors. But because children are developing and they don't have those kind of mechanisms of kind of reflection so developed yet, right? It's hard for them to do that. And that's where I think parents do need to come in, right?
Now, I wonder, is, the effect of all these likes and all of that, it's only for people who are already prone to suffer some sort of behavioral issue like depression or anxiety, or it could happen to anybody?
And that's a good question. I mean, Star, you can answer. My belief is that if there are pre-existing dispositions or existing mental health issues, including kind of, depression, anxiety, school refusal, or, school phobia, the autism spectrum disorders, right? So there certainly could be more of a propensity, other types of, substance, use disorders, okay, process addictions or other substance misuse, you could have a greater likelihood. But I would also say that even if it doesn't really, if that's not something you were disposed to, certainly, again, knowing what we know about where we've all been with COVID and the kind of removal from one another, I think everyone at this point, my belief is could have, this could become a concern. And what do you think, Star?
And Cassandra is saying, there is this documentary in Netflix called The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, everyone should watch that. We had that there. And when I brought up the engineers, that is really, it's those that are on it, they're not acting. They're, this is a live thing. The actual director is just Jeff Orlowski, if people want to look it up. It's an independent film done by Jeff Orlowski, and it's very, very, very powerful. It's really these guys that developed these programs. They dropped out of every organization. We're calling Google and Apple, and they created these programs and the analogs and the they were the biggest players. They have kind of turned a different view of how they see.
Great conversation to watch as a family.
As a family.
Do movie nights, this would be a good one to do.
It's perfect.
And
especially for younger people. Yeah. I mean, my adult children told me about it and had already seen it, but again, they were, emancipated adults said, Mom, you've got to see it. And in one of my children's case, it modified her screen time. That's how powerful. I think it's like 90 minutes, but that's how powerful it was.
The tracking that happens on these phones is what it also goes into, which we're not really going to go into here, but they talk about what we look at and what holds our attention is sellable, basically. And so even we were talking about this before, my phone will tell me my screen time is up 20% this week from last week. And this is a relatively new feature.
Yes.
It's down last time. And it kind of is, so there's, the technology has good intentions and there are cons to it that go along as well. But getting back to your question about what is this impact going to be on our mental wellness? And I don't think we know that yet. I think this is going to be coming in the next it's here now, of course. That population, why they are more susceptible is that they have not developed a self yet. Adults, if they've gone through a developmental phase, have developed a solid sense of self. That's the goal, right? Teenagers are developing it, and how they integrate worthiness and worthwhileness is on likes and pings and that validation. You liked what I said. I put my false self out there on social media, not my real self, but my false self with the bunny ears and the all the things that take all the wrinkles off and blemishes and all that. It's a pseudo self. So one of the things we talk about is helping people go from URL to IRL. Okay, catchy URL, right? Virtual into IRL, in real life. Right? That we are not living just in a virtual world. We're connecting and we are social creatures. So there is going to be continue looking at the impact on our young folks who have gone through a real disconnection from some of the things that would be social formulations, going to the prom, going to school and, knocking around the hallways. That was removed. And I don't think we know what the impact of this is going to be yet.
Yeah, the virtual versus the real. I mean, every generation, right, is this development of self, right? But the distinction again between this virtual self, right, and where I am in real life, my real life self, because every child's developed, but they developed in different ways. So do we necessarily know that developing virtually is going to be more negative than knocking around the classroom, right? Some of the benefits of being in this virtual development is unbelievable, right? What kids can access and what kids can learn but it shouldn't necessarily replace those other experiences that we do know, at least historically, right, or have tremendous value, which is the human interaction and developmental piece, and doing that in person, not necessarily virtually. So in the future, how are we really going to measure it, and what's going to really be the excess? The greatest balance really is, I think, if there's this thoughtful and moderation based kind of balance between it should be in person and it should be in real time, like Stor's saying, and then having to understand and accept that there really is because we're not going to necessarily go not virtual, right? This isn't, going to go away. There's going to be more modes of people being able to express themselves and view things and engage with the world in multi-dimensions, right? Now we can look at these things you put on your eyes and, you're in the middle of it. It's, a lot of fun. I know families that are doing like this together, right? Playing these games and, so that's not a bad thing, right? That's a good thing. But how does it need to interface with the in real life value because screen time is not necessarily going to ever, I don't think, in my belief, really replace what some of the value is of an in-person connection, where you see people's full bodies, where you sense them in different ways and view them and smell them and experience their motions. You're never going to be able to have that no matter what mode of screen.
No matter how many X's and O's you sent, it doesn't feel the same.
Well, emojis were really created to add tone to text, because you would say on my way, or on my way with an excitement, or you couldn't tell when somebody would say, a response. Are they mad at me? Are they not all mad at me? And smiley faces, like, I'm happy about this. But otherwise, words, are only 7% of communication. Tone and intonation is the other 30%, and the body language, as Sue was just relating to, our energy, and we pick up the subtleties, and we're not even conscious that we're doing that. So I think, what we also wanted to talk about with screen time is, I'm just, I'm looking at myself. This is an odd experience. If I were giving a webinar or presentation, I'd be looking at an audience. I'm not looking at an audience, I'm looking at myself, right? In some context that's in here. It's a very strange way of re-experiencing through screens, right? But we also want to talk about those who have gone into remote work and spend more hours in front of a screen, and what that has done, and how do we, take care of our eyes, right? We don't blink as often. I think the statistic is a third to half of the time, if we were not looking at a screen, our blinking decreases. So they have the 20-20 rule, 20-20-20 rule. So every 20 minutes, you look at an object 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And I'll just share this personal experience. Since we went really quickly into COVID, I had 2 burst eye blood vessels. I never had one before in my life, 2. And I thought, this is related to how much time I'm looking at a screen. The strain on my eye. So it looked terrible. It was no big deal. It wasn't, indicative of anything else. But so using just that 20-20-20 rule can help, decrease the tension. We've also talked about inactivity when we're sitting in front of a screen, or how to take a stretch and go walk around the building, or how that's impacting on people.
And I think it's really what we do know. Listen, this is just, again, AMA and pediatrics and story you quoted someplace. Really, as children develop, they need to be active, right? They need to interact with others. That's partly why we're seeing these huge spikes with kids not having been socially interacting with others, and literally playing. Play is how most young children develop and learn the world, and develop their own individuation from everything other than their mother, right? So their mother or their primary caregiver. So children really are and should be active, right? That's how their bodies develop. That's how and it doesn't have to be, it can be ice skating. It doesn't have to be running a marathon. It doesn't have to be, it can be bowling, not being on the football team, right? But it should be we know that children's bodies and minds need to develop through play, through activity, and through socialization. But more so, even as much as parents and other role models are important, and caregivers, they need to do that with other children. And that's not just, and shouldn't just be through a screen or done remotely. It really needs to be done in person.
Yeah. And you be saying that it would be nice if there was 1 or 2 days where social media was shut off, so that people can have a relaxed me day, or have the chance for more traditional socialization. He or she says, where I grew up, you see people on their cell phones most of the time. But when I went to a city down south for a week, one of the first things I noticed was that no one was on their phone when they interacted with others at restaurants, at the park, etc. It was nice to see that.
Yeah. I think that's where we can set some limits. Listen, you could say Sunday's fun day. We're going to, or every other Sunday, or for 2 hours of a Sunday, we're putting our instruments away. I mean, to your partner, and Stora brought up kind of an example of someone who's a marriage and family therapist, a relationship therapist, and said, the last thing you look at night, and this is for all of us, I think it's, should not be a screen in front of you, right? It probably, but think how many of us it may be, right? That's almost scary. So, and it's, I think also the other thing is I mean, I do this, not just with children, but I do it with, other adults that I, have a relationship with them. But friends, other, colleagues, sometimes not other people I know, if you will. I call them out and I say, what are you doing on your phone? Put your phone, oh, I just have to look this up on Facebook. Oh, I posted this or someone posted. Stop. We're together. Can you do that later? And I'm not saying it in an angry way. I'm trying to say to them, I miss you. I'm here with you right now, and I'm missing you because you're not here with me. If you're here, you're not really here with me. And most of the time, they kind of get that.
I like the idea of, kind of being real with people. Hey, I miss you. I want to connect with you. That gives language to what you're talking about, Sue. And to UB's comment, that could be a family challenge, right? We have dry January where people don't drink alcohol for the month of January. You could have a techno-free day and see, or maybe you give it limit to 1 hour and see who can do it. Make it a challenge. Give a
reward.
Or whoever
give a
can
reward.
Do it.
You can pick where we're going to have dinner, where we're going to order dinner from, or whatever you want to eat for dinner, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And, I think that when we aren't sort of mindful, I guess this is sort of a little bit of what this chat is about, is to bring it to awareness and mindfulness. And there's a term called fundamental attribution error. So what that means is, and I think this applies to parents and kids or spouses, is to say, when I check my phone, I'm just quickly doing something really fast. I'm just finishing this up. So I give myself a pass. But when I see you doing it, you're addicted, you're insensitive, why don't you put your phone down? Right? So how that, contributes to how we then approach this conversation and the disconnection that we're feeling. And it just brings it to mindfulness. We just have to be aware.
Something that I've come to realize is there is never a very quick time when you're on the phone. It happens to me all the time. I said, oh no, it's just a quick thing. But that quick thing leads to another thing, and then something pops and you click there, and next thing you know, it's half an hour for something that should have taken 1 minute or two.
Absolutely.
So quick time on the phone, tablet, or whatever, that doesn't exist. I've already come to realize that. So if I need to do something quick on the phone, I just don't do it.
Oh, that's good, because you set your own limit.
Yes.
Right? You can literally physically set a limit. You can put a time on your phone, a timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to look at this Facebook site or whatever it is. And, I know other people that might say, I look at such and such first thing, some social media site or whatever it is, first thing in the morning. And then I don't look at it all day. That's it. I won't even look at it at night. Because I'm unwinding and I don't want to be on my phone, and I might have to have other interactions, but that's the kind of awareness. And I think what Stora said is important. I know I've said to I've assumed that people were, and this is what you said about, attributing, right? When I'm on it, it's meaningful, but when you're on it, it's probably, I've done that with my children and they've said, Mom, I'm researching something. I'm like, well, you don't look like you're studying, whatever. It's something very, very meaningful, I'm researching, something that's very important to them and it's very valuable. And I assumed it wasn't important. And similarly, we can do that with other people. It was, when I said it to people and they said, believe it or not, it is work, or believe it or not, it's my daughter. She has a question about something, my 16-year-old. So that was a very important point.
I think we can also add in here, we left out a population that's changed also, is adults who are caring for elderly parents and wanting to connect with them and make sure that they're available and they're not, socially active. And so if, for example, just being mindful and communicating, if you're going out to dinner saying, my mom's at home, I'm expecting a call from her just in case, is that okay with you? And that creates engagement around, I might have to take this call, but here's why. And Another thought that occurred to me is, thinking what you were saying, Sandra, it's just going to take me a minute, right? And they getting back to this, Netflix streaming increase, right? People binge watching is, they know, if you're watching a series, you finish that episode and it goes so quick, you have like 33 seconds to turn it off and then you're hooked into the right? It's set up. There's a real psychology around our time. That is the commodity that's really talked about in that
social dilemma.
Social dilemma.
Because they always leave the best part to the very end. So you want to know what comes next.
And then by the time you try to turn it off, it's already starting the next episode.
We're falling in the trap. That's how I feel right now.
That's right.
And that's with everything. I mean, when people are on their phones, they know what you're looking at on your Amazon accounts. They know what you're looking at on your phones. They know what you're streaming. This is that's what, they do, so
Yeah.
that's how they design it.
So
Well,
we think
We're,
it's going to be
we're
quick.
definitely not going to fix the world in an hour.
Right.
But now that we only
Moderate.
have 5 minutes left, I want Sue and Star, why don't you just share, 1 or 2 tips that people can take home today and say, okay, I can get started with these so that we do better, I guess, with social media and electronics and screen time.
So I think one of the 2 tips I would want to bring one is to encourage as a family self-monitoring, and that so that it doesn't become the parent monitoring, but that you try to incorporate this into the family members, that we have discussions around how much time is screen time. And then I also want to say to parents, to use technology as a way of engaging with your children. Learn that Candy Crush game, play a video. Don't, it shouldn't be so polarized. I think we want to include it in. So one of the things I did with my son, who loved to play this Mario Kart, he thought it was the most hilarious thing ever that I drove off the cliff every single time. Couldn't do it, but it was fun. The point was not to win the video game. The point was to have time interacting as a family, or interacting. And you can use the media to do that, right? So laugh at a silly YouTube video, share it, but use it as a way of connecting.
I think that's the only thing that I would add is make it appear, make it in reality so that it's not some huge sacrifice, right? That if you're really going to limit it or whatever, you're not going to necessarily feel like something's being withheld from you. You're saying you're doing the opposite. I'm going to engage in it, right? And that allows us to be together, even though we are in front of a screen, but it's in a positive way. People aren't isolated from one another. It's a connection. You're physically, even probably, I bet, since he was living with you, sitting next to each other. But don't make it feel like limiting screen time is a sacrifice. You want it to be, enjoyable. You want it to be satisfying other types of needs that you have, and diversifying your activities, and diversifying the things that are going to help make you happy and keep you healthy, that are valuable and needed and necessary.
Yeah.
And catch your kids when they're not on their screens, noticing you're playing nicely, you're doing this, you're doing that.
Reward them. Through positive reinforcement. Yeah,
positive.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you guys saw a chat that we had a couple of weeks ago with Denise Roma, the dietitian, and the exercise physiologist, James. And we were saying, okay, no more sacrifices, just commitments.
That's right.
I like that.
Right.
I think that we can apply that same concept here. Like, we're not going to sacrifice time. We're just going to commit to make some changes.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. And let me see. Patrick is saying it's really refreshing when people just talk and not reply on the electronics so much. Yes, they are vital, but at times you just have to disconnect and do active things.
Right.
And then Lynette says, yes, Patrick, talking, engaging person to person also builds soft skills, good communication skills, which are too often lacking both in young people as well as adults. Yes, definitely. You know, and we see all these bad comments. That's another whole topic. That's
Yeah,
another
that's
can
another,
of
yeah.
worms that we could open. We don't have the time for that, but you're invited to talk about that as well. Like how
Safety, yeah, safety, psychological, physical, emotional.
let's do
such.
that. Let's bring you back to talk about emotional safety and social media. That sounds like good for another topic. So I just want to say thank you. This has been a great conversation. Definitely, we could talk about this for hours and hours. So you're invited back. I'm going to send you dates. And thank you to all of our participants for being with us today. Let me see, next week, we're going to be talking about menopause and, you know, how do we feel when we're getting to menopause, and then how we feel when we're living with menopause. And, you know, very interesting to women, but certainly not less interesting for men, so that you know what women are dealing with. So I will see you next week, 12 p.m. Thank you, Sue.
Thank
you, Star. It's a
Thank you
pleasure
for
to
having
see you
me.
at least this way for now.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.